him like this. So,
Where are you going?
if he does get squirmy, he might have to use that.
Where's it going?
You hear that? He's squirming. He might get let's just wrap him down.
You can see. He usually does that.
Or you just want to go? You just want to go?
Bathroom, no bathroom.
He's just digging.
That's okay because they're
Wait, turn it down.
we'll see, but not no, but not yes.
So how long do they live?
They live for about 10 to 12 years. They are growing animals and pack animals, so they'll stay in like the little tiny families, which are like the same 10 to 12 different Fennec boxes, depending on where they live or stuff like that. But yeah, they live for quite a long time.
Buy a baby?
No, like it's just they live for
A long
80+
time.
years.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time for them to get big. So hypothetically speaking, you can keep it till it's little and then just sell it. I'm trying to convince my dad to let me have one.
Just show it with it. How many do y'all have?
8.
8.
And I think all of them boys want one. So I think Emma's gonna get one. I really want one. She's definitely getting one.
We have enough things we keep alive right now. We don't want to keep anything else alive.
Any animals?
4.
4. Dogs, cats.
3 dogs and a cat. And the cat thinks it's a dog.
I have a dog dog.
Yeah.
With a little dog, she was like a chihuahua mix with a dog. And she was in the car, she would like sleep on the dash. And if it was raining, she'd chase a bunch of bugs. And she'd always get like the whole stuff. I have it's probably a mix of no more rain and also it takes a second for it to get like comfortable and chill. Where is it? Oh my god. Damn it, no. Trying to get the tree. We have some really good kids.
Yeah, but the cat chases the mockingbirds. And so it gets on top of the swing set, and then the bird is in the tree. And then one day the dog's scared of the cat's scared of the bird. They were all sitting out there in a line, just stalking each other, and the bird was basically controlling the whole situation.
It's okay. If you want to grab them to readjust, all you do is like grab under their
The
chest.
Okay.
Pretty much just like a cat.
So these stay out here now?
Yeah, so they have their enclosure right there. They love the sand. They burrow in their little tiny box. When we had them in the house, they wanted to go outside. They love the outside. Right now I have 30+ laying chickens, 1 cat, 1 kitten that I rescued because it just showed up at my house. 3 dogs, 3 guinea fowl, and then we just have goats.
So is this what her mom, this is gonna be?
No,
Her mom had a goose,
No,
goose
he's
show
supposed
up,
to-
and then
He's a
she just-
pilgrim.
he's sweet.
He lives in the kiddie pool.
Hi guys. What car are you?
We have it. That baby stuff. Yeah.
take off. Regular video.
So Dash just turned a year old, like 3 weeks ago. So he is still very much so a baby. And so when we're handling a sloth, we have to keep in mind that their eyesight is extremely poor. They have a condition that's called rod monochromacy, and that means that they only have rod cells in their eyes and no cone cells. So the rod cells pick up motion, so they can see things moving a lot better than we can. And for a sloth that potentially has a lot of other things that could eat them out in the wild, they've got to be more cautious of those things. So when we're petting him, we just want to stay down the middle of his back and kind of the top of his head. But moving over on the sides, like touching the arms or making movements up here, can be kind of startling because he doesn't know if it's something to be scared of or if it's his food, because usually when I'm feeding him, I'll put his food dish. I don't want to tease him because there's nothing in it, but I'll set it like right there on his arm, and he'll know that the food's right there. And so we do just kind of want to stick down the middle of their back. They're kind of unlike a dog or a cat, where they might like the scritches down the middle of the back or rubbed up the opposite way, but he really does not like that. And for the chin, it's really tempting to scratch him on his chin too, because the cat might like that, and he's looking backwards and it looks inviting. But it can be startling for a sloth, all of a sudden something touching their neck that they can't see coming. So do we know who's wanting to hold first? Okay. You want to sit in that blue chair. He's going to twist around. He'll wrap his legs around your kind of your waist area, and then you'll put one hand underneath his booty, and the other hand you can place on his back. Getting a little bit of food out of here. And you're welcome to have a seat in that other chair, wherever's most comfortable for you. Where'd you guys say you were coming from?
Chattanooga.
Chattanooga.
Not too far.
Yeah?
This is her birthday gift.
Oh. Has it already passed, or is it today?
It's Tuesday.
Oh, well, happy early
Oh, I'm sorry.
birthday.
I was thinking like right
You're
here.
fine.
You are so cute.
I don't know if he's gonna be hungry or not, but you can kind of hold this food bowl right here next to his face, see if he wants anything. Is this your guys' only encounter for the day?
Yes.
Yeah? Where'd you hear about us? Just on social media? Yeah.
I think somebody had
Oh, big sneeze.
posted or said they were interested. I saw it kind of, and I was like, hold
Yeah.
up, because a few years ago we drove to Florida
Mhm.
because there weren't many places
Yeah.
that did sloth encounters.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh. So I brought another friend up last month, August and July with my son,
Yeah.
for her birthday.
Yeah.
She met Zoe.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, we gotta go again.
Mhm.
We haven't done baby sloth.
Yeah. And we actually just got word yesterday that our next baby sloth is just about ready, and she's gonna be coming this way. And her name will be Chloe. So then we'll have Flash, Dash, Zoe, and
Oh,
Chloe.
she's bitty baby.
Yeah. When we first get
Is that
her, they're only
rice?
like 2 pounds. Yeah, it's the same mixture out
Oh,
there
okay.
that he's eating.
Oh my gosh. So how old is she?
She'll be right at about 5 months old or so.
Okay.
That's about when they're weaned.
She's kind of more brown.
Yeah.
They start off that way, or
They
just
start, it kind of depends. Dash was a lot more like that real dark, almost a black color
Okay.
when he was first a baby. But you know, typically like Zoe was more so a chocolatey brown like
Okay.
this when we first got
Okay.
her. But it all kind of varies. You can see how tiny.
so cute.
And so when we first get her, she won't even be able to wrap her legs around our torso like
She'll be
Dash
so
is.
tiny.
Yeah, we'll have to hold her on our arm like how when I first picked him up.
That is so
That's
fun.
how I'll have to hold on. You can see her back, how dark she is.
Where is she coming
Her
from?
face.
to ask that.
Yeah, we don't say the exact
Okay.
location, especially if we're on a live.
Well, that's true,
because
yeah.
his phone would never stop ringing.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, he would not sell any of his sloths to somebody that has never owned a
Right.
sloth before. But it's in the U.S.
Within
Yeah,
US.
he is in the U.S. And he specializes in his ambassador sloths like this, where
Okay.
you are actually able to hold them and interact with them and them
Cool.
enjoy it. You know, there have been places where you can go down to like Roatan, Honduras, and do encounters down there But those sloths are wild sloths that have been taken from the rainforest and you're doing encounters, and they've just been used so many times over and over again that they're just tolerating it. It's not that they genuinely enjoy that interaction, they just can't really do much about it. Once they've used up all their energy reserves, there's not really any fight back that they can have. But with Dash, he actively seeks out interaction, and so if he wasn't sleeping right then and he saw me, as soon as he woke up and he realized, he climbs right on. So that's how it is for both Dash and Zoe, and that's how it will be for Chloe too.
That's cool.
Now Flash, our oldest sloth, he's almost 7 years old. He has never been held by anybody. That's not something that he's going to be comfortable with, because naturally sloths are very solitary animals and aren't just going to be born wanting to hold on to somebody, even if they're born and raised in captivity. That's not something that's naturally deep down, like a dog. They've been domesticated for years and years and years and years and years, and it's just, second nature for them to be around people. They're just, associate with that. That's a little bit different for sloths. So there's a lot of time and work and effort that has to go into them from a young age to get them to where they actually enjoy it. They're very routine animals. They like to do the same thing the same way at the same time every day. And so it just became natural for them that the breeder would go in at the same time every day for those babies, make that clicker noise as they went in, so it's like associating the interaction there, and so everybody knew what was going on. Mom's done it before. She's been raised in that program, so she knows the routine. So it's never stressful for her, and then because mom's never stressed out, baby's never stressed. So yeah,
That's cool.
Now, did you get to do the sloth encounter with Zoe the last time, or?
I didn't. I let her and her daughter do
okay,
it. I
yeah.
wait in the car, but
Yeah.
she was thrilled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Zoe's definitely a lot bigger than Dash.
Yeah,
is, I'm
she
sure you
was.
saw
Yeah, she
pictures,
was.
yeah.
Yeah.
How old are they when they're full grown?
When they're around 2 years is when they're considered fully mature. Yeah, Zoe's pretty much plateaued off with her weight. She won't be 2 until in December.
Okay.
But she's pretty much stayed constant the last few months. The baby boy's here still got a lot of growing left to do. He's only about 6 pounds. We weighed him yesterday.
This
We
one?
went to the bathroom.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess he's just all
Yeah. And that hair will continuously get longer as he gets older, and so it just makes them look a lot bigger than they actually are. And muscle weighs more than fat,
True,
and
yeah.
sloths don't have a whole lot of muscle on them. They don't have, their muscle to mass ratio is really small. So yeah.
You're so stinking cute. Yes, you are. Is it yummy?
A lot of people are surprised by how soft they are actually when they actually are able to hold them and pet them. Because a lot of people have seen pictures of wild sloths or videos of them, and they've got that real coarse fur
Yeah.
to them. So they've got a lot of that moss and algae and everything that's growing on them
Oh yeah.
that they require because they need to be
Out in the wild,
camouflaged. Yeah. For a sloth that has essentially no defense mechanism, they need some sort to be able to
Yeah.
stay alive. And for them, they're just masters of disguise for the most part. And for a sloth, how I was mentioning where they pick up motion really easily, if they're hanging out on that branch and say they're just minding their own business, and all of a sudden out of the corner of their eye they see a little bit of movement, something coming towards them, they need to react to that, because a jaguar is not going to come barreling out on the end of that branch after the sloth. They're going to be sneaking up on them. So they have to react to that, because in the distance, if they see something that looks like it's coming towards them, regardless of if they can make out if it's a jaguar or not, because they really just see shapes and blobs, if he sees something coming towards him, he is booking it to the end of that branch, because if he gets out there, that branch may be able to support a 10 or 15 pound sloth, but probably not that. Yeah, exactly.
So does the jaguar know to back it
Well,
up?
if it's daring enough to, that's the hope, is that they'll get out there and just leave him alone. But if the jaguar is daring enough to go out on the end of the branch as well, and that branch eventually breaks, that's kind of best case scenario for the sloth, because they're built to be able to withstand those falls. Yeah, so their bones are extremely pliable, and when they fall, they kind of fall like a pancake. When they hit the ground, their rib cage will just kind of flex under their body weight and then go back to normal. So they don't really sustain broken bones, nor internal damage. So they've got a lot of connective tissue that's holding all of their organs in the middle, so they don't slosh around when they hit the floor. So it works out pretty well for them, but the jaguar not so much, because cats try to land on all 4 feet,
Right.
and falling from 100 feet in the air onto all fours is not going to end up very well for them.
He's got his tongue out. You are so. Is the jaguar one of the biggest predators?
Not necessarily. So the harpy eagle is really the most successful thing that tries to
Pluck
eat
him out
the,
of-
yeah, because they have the element of surprise. You know, a jaguar is going to be sneaking up, but the sloth is going to be able to see that. But something coming above them
Yeah.
that, you know, just comes out of absolutely
Okay.
nowhere. And it does happen quite often because the sloths tend to stay at the very tippy tops or the very end of the branches because those are where the most fresh leaves are growing. And the sarcopia leaves that they're eating will eventually start to build up this toxin in them. And the older that the leaves are, the more toxins that they have, and it's more difficult for them to break down.
Okay.
As well as the cellulose, it'll get a lot thicker and a lot harder to break down for them. So then they eat those, you know, fresh leaves that are on the end of the branches where
Okay.
there's not as much foliage to cover them. So
Yeah.
they're really easy to spot for them, especially if they're moving around in the daytime. Now, some people consider sloths to be nocturnal animals because they do move around a lot more at night because that's when they can see the best. The way that everything is set up in their eyes, it's kind of like night goggle vision, and looking through night goggles in the daytime doesn't work out that well. So already looking through night goggles, I'll go ahead and set this over here. You can really only see shapes and blobs. You can't distinguish what's what or who's who. And so him just looking back at us, he can't really tell the difference between me or you by just looking at us. He just sees figures. But he hears my voice, and he knows that I talk with my hands a lot and sees me moving my hands. Yeah. And so that's how he knows who I am, and that's how he knows to look at me like that.
Very small. Safe and small.
And I try my best when I'm doing his encounters to not move my hands as much, or sometimes I'll sit over there on the counter, no pun intended,
Yeah.
but so that I don't move around because it's very distracting for him to see a lot of movement back here. And sometimes he gets so enamored with it that he'll start pushing back and leaning back, and that scares a lot of people because they think about babies, you gotta support them. But a
Like, I'm
sloth
good.
has like way better core strength than I do because they can lean all the way back in your lap, and within, I mean, way quicker than I can do a sit up, sit all the way back. And if something startles them, like Zoe, he's pretty good about, you know, staying real close to you. Zoe gets really exploratory, and she puts a lot more faith in people than I do, especially for somebody she's just met.
Come on.
Because she'll be holding on to you around your waist, but her front feet she'll completely let go and just be leaning back. And a lot of times she'll like clasp her little claws together. She's just the cutest thing ever. But if somebody closes the door, or if somebody tries to touch her belly, which is really sensitive, she can come back up pretty quickly.
No,
Yeah,
it's not
and then
where
she
you're supposed
doesn't
to touch it.
explore around as much. And that's the same way for him. So how tempting that is to scratch
I
in there on
know.
his chin with him exposing it like that. If you go to touch him there, most of the time he scrunches back up because it scares him, and then he doesn't look around as much.
You're so cute.
It's
I know, he's like,
adorable.
that tongue is amazing.
He either got his tongue stuck out halfway like that, or his mouth is hanging like halfway open, and he just looks astonished. He's sweet.
Is this where the other two
Yeah.
are?
Flash stays in there, and
Okay.
Zoe stays in there. Now we're just about to, because we're about to have Chloe on our
Right.
way, and so we're going to start implementing Dash to be in there with Zoe, because they were
Okay.
raised in the same way, and they were
Okay.
raised around a lot of other sloths, which again is not natural for
Right.
sloths. But since they've already been used to that, it's going to be a lot easier to implement them together
them, yeah.
than putting somebody in with Flash who has never been around any other sloths.
Okay.
And so they're not going to be cuddled up next to each other. We're going to have to modify her enclosure quite a bit so that they can have separate areas. And eventually, once we get Chloe in, all three of them will go together. And our plan is to build a sloth house. So they've got a great big indoor area that probably has like some of those the slats on the roof where it's clear, where the sun
that'd be
can come
cool,
in.
yeah.
So they get natural light and everything. And then Flash will probably just have run the roofs here. We may knock down this wall or make some sort of a
That's
Is there hope that they'll breed?
Do what?
Is there hope that they'll breed?
Not necessarily. We don't have plans to breed them. We have the availability to, or the ability to do so, because Dash and Zoe are both completely unrelated.
Okay.
Although they came from the same facility, he tracks his sloths all the way back from the original sloths that he got. And so he knows that genetically they're completely different.
Oh, that's
so we
cool.
would have the ability to.
That's
I'm not sure about Chloe. I don't know if she's going to be related at all to
Yeah.
Dash or Zoe, but yeah. He's got quite a few different bloodlines there that he's got going on.
That's
And he's
cool.
really the #1 supplier for all of the facilities where you can actually hold and interact with a
Because he
sloth,
starts it off.
where it's like, comfortable for them. I'm sure that there's facilities where you're able to hold a sloth for a short amount of time because they're just tolerating it, and then they get to go back into their enclosures. But if they genuinely enjoy it and they're just wanting to sit there and just wanting to relax and be comfortable like that, they'd come from him.
Okay.
So he really specializes
That's
in
his-
his
that's his
ambassador
thing.
sloths, yeah. He raises sloths as well, similar to how Flash was, where he was raised around people but never held, and so he's
Okay.
not comfortable with that.
So it's kind of like more zoo.
Exactly, yeah, that's kind of the facility that he came from. And we
Okay.
got him when he was already 3 years old.
Oh, gotcha.
So he was dead set in those ways,
Yeah.
and just, all he was ever exposed to was somebody coming in to feed him, put his food in his dish, and then
Okay.
leave. So when we first got him, he was already 3 and used to that. John was his primary caregiver for like the first 2 years, the owner. And so he really got comfortable with John, and he's the person that got Flash to come out of his shell and start to come down and interact with us. And now he's to the point where I mentioned that they're really routine animals. When I get here in the morning at 9:30, I go ahead and open up Flash's door and start chopping up everybody's breakfast and making everybody's food. Because before long, I turn around and I see Flash already hooking onto that door frame and coming out here onto this branch because that's where he does his encounters.
That's cool.
And regardless of whether or not he comes out in the morning, if he decides he doesn't want to come down for whatever reason, he still gets his food and his breakfast. And occasionally it does happen because he doesn't actively seek out human interaction. I say that, but at the same time, he does really enjoy John. There are some days where he's completely just not coming down for me because I've got the food and he could care less about me. But if John goes in there and starts talking, he really does have a better
That's cool.
relationship with John.
That's cool.
And that's what happened this morning. He wasn't that hungry and he didn't eat very much for us. But when John came in, started the encounter and we just moved on and we were holding Dash, John came in and started talking to him and he came down pretty quick. And then it just makes me look like a terrible
Like-
sloth keeper because I'm like, I'm supposed to be a sloth keeper and I can't even get him to come down, but he does. He
That's
has
just
a really
his-
good relationship
that's cool.
with him. Yeah.
So that's the encounter, because there was like a 2-part, like
Yeah,
where
the
you
VIP.
feed one, okay, and then hold
Yeah,
the other.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's got it made too, because he made his own schedule. When he started to develop that, after he developed that routine where he started to come 10 o'clock, because when we got here at 9:30, we'd start making everybody's breakfast. And by 10 o'clock, he's really banging on that door
He's like,
frame
"I'm
going,
there."
tap, tap, and we know he's right there. And sometimes while we're doing other encounters, you'll slowly see his little head come out into
Oh,
frame
that is
right here.
hilarious.
And we'll just open up his door and he comes out and asks him for snacks in the middle of the day. But the only, set schedule for him is for in the morning from 10 to 11, and that's if he's fully booked. Sometimes he just has a 10 o'clock
Okay.
encounter that'll go 30 minutes.
Okay.
But yeah, so they're all very spoiled babies, and they've developed their
I
own
can
schedule
tell.
that they like to stick to. And so this afternoon, if you guys had not booked to see Dash and nobody else, it was an open hour for him, I would have still tried to make time to come in
Because
there
it's
and
his
hold him.
schedule.
It is, and they like to
Ah.
stick to it. And there was a little boy that was in here earlier that was telling me that his cat has a routine schedule where every night he shakes his little, treat bag and tells him a certain thing, and he'll come up into his room and get a snack.
Cute.
And I was like, yeah, he probably would be very upset if you didn't do that, and you
Uh-huh.
went there for the night, and you spent the night at a friend's house or something. His whole routine's thrown off
Right.
because they like to do the same thing. And sloths are very much so like that. But it is just the 2-toed sloths that we have here. There are also 3-toed sloths, but they're really difficult to keep in captivity because their diets are extremely sensitive.
Okay.
In the wild, they would be eating about 95% leaf material, and that would be the leaves of the Cercophia trees, which don't grow in North America. So it's really difficult to keep those in captivity. And apparently they've been trying to make some groves down in southern parts of Florida and California to
Okay.
try to grow some of those. They haven't had great success just yet with it, but they're trying their best to. Those trees really would grow best in a greenhouse environment because how hot and humid conditions they need. But those trees can also grow up to be 100 plus feet in the air,
Okay.
and so it would really not ideally the best situation for them.
Grass is telling.
I hate when that starts to go off because people are like, "Oh, fire alarm!" I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, no."
You're good.
Oh, well, hang
But typically when people picture a sloth in their head, because all the sloth advertising and everything is all three-toed sloth, those are the ones that have
Yeah.
that darker band across their eyes. And that's just, the most normal thing that people think of,
Right.
and that's how the advertising always is. But those are just for the three-toed sloths. Now, that Flash kind of has a darker, almost like, he almost looks like he's got brown mascara on, because it goes like
Okay,
right around
okay.
his eyes, but the three-toed have that whole band right
Okay,
there.
yeah.
And then their faces aren't quite as long as the two-toed, they're kind of more smushed in, yeah. And that's why that gives them like that perpetual smile look for the three-toed. But their skeleton structures are also quite different. If you were to look at the skeleton of a two-toed sloth, their spine, you would see their spine is a lot longer because they have like 4 or 5 extra vertebrae in their lumbar spine that gives them the capability to be holding on or facing their hips one way and then turn 180 degrees backwards to look back behind them. The three-toed sloths can't do that, but where they lack that in the lumbar spine, they make up for it in their cervical spine and as a tail. And so they have like 3 vertebrae as a tail that they'll actually use when they make their long trek to go down to use the bathroom once a week. And the second thing is that since they've got that extra vertebrae in their cervical spine, they can rotate their neck all the way 180 degrees back behind them, which is really freaky to watch because
Yeah.
it's like something out of a horror movie.
Yeah, I like that.
But yeah, because most of the time the two-toed sloths, they only really move their spine like that if they're hanging from a branch. They can extend all the way down by letting go with their front claws. They'll extend down and be eating some branches that are lower, some of those leaves, and then they can twist their spine with their back like that.
Oh,
That's a big yawn.
But yeah, I always tell people that's like the cutest / scariest thing ever because you wouldn't expect that cute little face to have all those razor sharp teeth.
I
back
was
there.
surprised
Yeah.
at how, especially with their
Yeah.
diet, you wouldn't
Yeah.
think.
They really just use those to grind up the leaves that they're eating. Grinding it up works a lot more than chomping it up for
Okay.
those leaves. So really it's just about efficiency, but if you were to look at the skeleton or the skull of a sloth without knowing anything about that animal, you would definitely think they were top of the food chain because of how long their arms are, their claws and everything.
Yeah.
And then those teeth would make them look like, there's something really impressive. But in reality, to see what they actually are and how low energy they have, it's pretty ironic. Kind of makes you second guess some of the dinosaurs if they were actually as ferocious as we make them out to be, or they just like little fluffy fluff balls or something to add on skin and hair and everything.
You are
What are
cute.
you looking at, buddy?
You are cute.
It's been about half of our time. Do you guys want to trade out now, or were you gonna?
I'll give her a little bit longer,
Okay,
and
that's
then
fine.
I'll do the last 15 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was mentioning how in the wild they've got all that moss and algae and everything on their backs that's really important for them. Sometimes he's got
God.
rice stuck there to the roof of his mouth. You can see. That little boy earlier said, it looks like he has a tooth growing from the roof of his
Oh,
mouth.
it's a
And I
piece
was
of
like, no, it's a piece of rice. I promise he doesn't have a tooth growing there.
That is hilarious.
But yeah, that moss and algae is really important for them, not only for camouflage, but it also feeds these specific type of moth that lives in their fur.
Moth?
Moths, yes. There's a very
Okay.
specific type, and it has a long scientific name, but for our purposes, we just call them the sloth moths because that is the only place they live in the
Really?
entire world. And they can't fly like other moths can. They require direct contact, even though they have wings. They're just pointless. So they need direct contact with the surface that they're trying to get onto. And they have to repopulate somewhere. They can't repopulate on the back of the sloth. They have to lay their eggs somewhere. And for the moths, that's the sloth's dung pile. And so that's why the sloth has to go all the way to the floor once a week to go to the bathroom so that those moths can crawl down off of the sloth, lay their eggs, and catch the
Wow.
ride before they lose their ride back to the canopy of the rainforest.
That's crazy.
Otherwise, that's a pretty long walk to get back up there to
Yeah.
the sloth.
That's crazy.
But they have to do that because those moths will lay their eggs, and a week later the eggs will be larvae, and last week's larvae are then this week's moths. And so the sloth has to go to that same spot every time, so those moths will have somewhere to crawl up onto him. And it's really important for the sloth to have those moths because they will produce a bacteria in their waste that the sloths will actually lick up and use to digest their food. So they don't use an enzymatic process like we
Crazy.
do.
Like all
They
the-
use a bacterial process. And that bacteria, they're not born with it. They have to get it from somewhere. So when they're babies, they're not born with those moths, but mom has those moths on their backs. And when they become about 3 days old, yeah, those moths will crawl onto the baby initially, but then around 3 days old, that baby starts to realize what mom's doing and what she's eating. And they'll kind of lick the mother or in the corners of her mouth and eat some of the food that she's eating from her mouth. And so they'll lick up some of her saliva, and the bacteria colony that she has established in her gut from those moths and her mother is also in her saliva and now be transferred to the baby. So it's a much slower process if they don't have those moths, like in captivity. You can see he doesn't have any moths on him, but he got that bacteria from his mother. And that's why it's so sensitive and so difficult to raise baby sloths, because it is so important that they stay in a stable condition and everything is right, the nutrition requirements and everything is met, because of how crucial that bacteria is to them. It has to be developed the right way, otherwise the rest of their life they're going to struggle with digesting their food.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So how long do they normally, like, when you're getting, like 5-6 months to establish all the...
They're about, yeah, right out there about. But they also, they eat a lot more frequently with their babies, and so for the first about year of their life, which Dash is in for a rude awakening because he's about to start spending some nights down here, because for the first year of his life, he stayed at the main house overnight, because he's gotten, food throughout the night and everything. And he's able to go now a whole night, like we just put his food in the dish in his enclosure and he'll climb up and get it. But when they're babies, they don't climb that much, especially right after they're weaned from their mothers. They stay in a basket like that for the most part, and they'll take naps in that basket. And then after a certain kind of time, they start to realize they can climb around.
He's like, excuse me?
That's not what I signed up for.
It's a rude awakening, buddy, but it's gotta happen.
It's coming. You get a new friend though. How excited are you about the new one?
It's really exciting.
This is like the
Because I've only
perfect
been
job.
here for about 3 months, well,
Oh,
3 and a
really?
half
Okay.
months now. I've known about this place for a long time, and I've got to see, how it's grown over the past 3 years,
Yeah.
because I rode with a large animal vet that does all the vet work for down here.
Okay.
So I saw Zoe when she was a baby, and they first got her, and I got to hold her and everything. But then it would go months before I saw her again, so I didn't get to see the whole growing up process and see her first steps from going from the basket and starting to climb and then going into her enclosure. I didn't get to witness all that, but now I get to witness it with
You get to
Chloe.
start
So,
it, yeah.
It'll
That's
be really
really
cool. I'll just have to be sure and not let her bond herself onto me like Zoe did with Donna, because Donna held Zoe all the time, John's wife.
To get used to it.
Yeah, because that's what she wanted. How are you going to say no to a little baby sloth that's reaching up at you?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
Come on.
and so she held her all the time, and they made such a tight bond that Donna can't really do encounters with Zoe anymore
Oh, because she
if
wants to go to her.
exactly. And so I really am gonna have to refrain myself from getting so attached to
Even if
her.
you see the hand.
Exactly, yeah. She's gonna have to learn to be a little bit more independent or be okay with going to other people and
Right.
stuff. And Zoe's completely fine with holding on to anybody,
But
but Donna is her
Donna's
person, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Just like Flash, John is Flash's
John.
person, yeah.
Does
And
he have a person?
Dash is kind of going back and forth, because I've been here for about his encounters every day, but in the evenings, up to the main
True,
house and he
okay.
stays up there. So he most evenings will sit in John's lap while they watch their TV
Oh my
show. Right now it's
gosh.
Frasier, but while they watch their TV show, he'll sit in his lap and he'll feed him
That's
his
the
dinner.
life, isn't it?
So
That's
big changes, but I try to, while I'm doing encounters and things, I'm not the only one that feeds him. I'll try to do other people feed him, and while he's doing encounters, see if they want to feed too. It just helps him, not attach himself to one person.
Yeah. I know you want him to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then she couldn't do the encounters.
Yeah.
You are so cute. So precious.
Got about 15 minutes left. You guys want to trade out now? Okay.
All right, one more.
Alright. So you won't have to do anything. He's just gonna climb up onto my arm. Okay.
Come on, bud. Come on. Here we go, buddy.
Alright. Have you trade out spots here. So he'll just open up his back legs and wrap right around his
Okay.
waist there, and you'll just put one hand underneath his booty, and then the other one you can use to put it down his back.
You are soft.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell they don't really have a natural scent or odor to them. They don't have any natural scent glands, musk glands, anything like that to them. So they're kind of, some people consider them to be kind of hypoallergenic animals, because they
Okay.
also don't have any shed. So you were holding it the whole time, you don't have any hair on you
Oh,
or
that's
anything
good,
like
yeah.
that would. Yeah,
I mean, you do just want to scratch that.
exactly.
chin.
Or kiss
Just
it.
some.
Yeah. For a lot of people,
like rub his nose.
yeah, the cuteness aggression starts to kick in.
It does. You're like, just once.
Hello. I didn't get to see your eyes.
I know, it's,
Mhm. A lot of people recently have been coming in and they've been saying that like they were gonna go down to Costa Rica or Guatemala or somewhere and do a sloth encounter down there, and they're like really disappointed because they've realized that a lot of those places have been shut down to where they can't hold them anymore. And the reason for that is because the Conservancy Agency has went in and told them and started to inform people and get more word out there that actually touching and holding and handling a wild sloth that has that entire ecosystem on their backs is really harmful for them. Those moths are very, very sensitive and they're feeding off of that moss and algae that's growing on the back of the sloth. But if somebody takes that sloth down out of that tree and pets it even just a few times, that's enough to completely disturb that ecosystem to where those moths are gonna say see ya and they go off to somewhere else, and then that leaves that sloth basically, you know, without any of that bacteria. And that bacteria, it's not that it just randomly will go away, but bacteria is really sensitive to temperature changes. And the temperature is always fluctuating, even at nighttime, you know, it'll drop quite a bit down there. And sloths cannot maintain their own body temperature very well at all. It takes too much energy to do that. So if the temperature outside drops, their temperature will as well, and that's what causes that bacteria to wipe out. So they may be fine for a while, but then as soon as that temperature drops and the bacteria is wiped out, it'll be approximately 2.5 weeks before that sloth will starve, and they can pass with a full belly of food, they just won't be able to digest any of it. Yeah. And that's the reason why we always tell people that owning a sloth as a pet is a terrible idea because of how sensitive they are. It doesn't make sense for an animal that the temperature of their environment would dictate whether or not they can digest their food, but that's how it works for sloths. And so a lot of people that aren't aware of that will get a sloth and put it into their house that they keep it like, 70 degrees. And that's just not, it doesn't work out like that for sloths. And so a lot of people are in for a rude awakening when they realize that the sloth doesn't live for very long. So, and none of the sloths that, if you're able to, there's certain states where they don't require as many licenses and things like that to be able to get an exotic animal like a sloth, unfortunately, because if somebody has enough money to go on the internet and realize that you can buy one, none of those sloths have come from a reputable breeder like where we got Dash and Zoe and where Chloe is coming from. No reputable breeder in the United States is going to sell one of their baby sloths to a member of the general public without, them having any prior knowledge of owning a sloth. And so those sloths, 95% of them have been brought over through the illegal animal trade and have been brought from the rainforest. And just the stress alone from taking a sloth like that and bringing it over is enough to, completely wipe out all that bacteria. Even if they're put into a good environment where it's, hot and humid for them, they still, if they don't have that bacteria in their system, it's going to be really difficult for them to keep on processing their food. Sometimes when he looks at me like that, all I see is just a little buffering signal on the back of his head.
that little tongue is the best thing ever.
I know.
Love it.
I had a dog that always kept his tongue out like that.
So she did.
It kind of reminds me of Fennec.
I think sometimes Dash just forgets how long that tongue is, and
Yeah,
he'll leave it
it's
sticking
like-
out like that. It's either that or he leaves it hanging halfway open. And then it just looks even more derpy.
It's cute.
But I'm excited to see all the little weird quirks that Chloe has.
Yeah.
Because even just the difference between Zoe and Dash are just astronomical. I mean, their personalities are so different. And little things that, Dash does now as a baby, Zoe didn't do, and vice versa. So for very something specific to Dash, is that he loves to wrap himself up in a towel or a blanket that's on the floor of his enclosure. Zoe doesn't, in her enclosure, she's never down on the floor. She's up in a hammock most of the time during the day, and then she'll climb a lot more at night. But Dash likes to be in the floor of his enclosure, and so he would not make it longer than a few hours if we put him out into the rainforest, because he would just be, just a sitting sloth there on the floor for whatever to come across and get him.
Okay, I'm chasing.
But he'll wrap himself up, and the breeder actually told us when we went to go pick him up from the airport that when you look into his enclosure there and you don't see a sloth, don't freak out. Move the towel because he's underneath it. And so it used to be just that he would just, crawl underneath the towel and just leave it sitting over the top of it. And now it's like he does somersaults once he's underneath the towel and will wrap himself up in it. And then another thing that he does that's very weird, and I don't understand why he does it, because sloths only nurse from their mothers from about 2 to 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Anywhere between that, there's variations between the species the type that it is, if it's a 2-toed or 3-toed, and even more the subcategories of that, for how long they nurse, and the gender plays a role in it as well. Regardless, even at 5 weeks, that's a very short amount of time that they're nursing from their mothers.
Yeah.
But he will still find the corner edge of a towel and suck on it like a little kitten or a puppy would do, or like a kid will suck a big bone. Yeah, it's just a comfort thing to him. So why he does that, I have no idea. Zoe didn't do that, and so it'll be interesting to see if Chloe does.
Chloe's little
Yeah,
things.
but
How long do you think it would take for Chloe to start, like, doing encounters and stuff?
it depends.
I guess
It
yeah,
varies
see how she
between
is.
Dash and Zoe. Regardless, they'll go through a 30-day quarantine before they start being introduced
Oh,
to
okay.
anybody. But then, they warm up fairly quickly because they've been introduced to
Right.
different types of people and during their whole conditioning process. So they warm up fairly quickly, but not everybody holds and handles a sloth like you guys will. Sometimes they get really excited and really
Just,
worked up for it, and they pet a lot quicker, and they feed off of the same type of energy that we have. And so we don't ever want to, have an encounter like that where,
They're yeah,
Yeah.
you don't want. So don't bring Cooper.
Yeah.
You are right.
He is spoiled rotten.
You can tell. Living your best life, aren't you?
But even down to their different personalities while they're being held are very different. So Dash likes to be down low in your lap so that he can look up at you and look back behind him to see what's going on.
Yeah.
He wants to be aware of everything. But Zoe, when she's full and she's just ready for her snuggles, she wants to be up high on your chest so that she can wrap her legs around your shoulders and put her head right up next to your neck where she can't see anything but your hair, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then she's weird because Dash is very consistent. He'll just, hold on to you the whole time. Sometimes he'll look back. Sometimes he'll push away a little bit to see what's going on. Then he'll snuggle back in. But Zoe can be like hardcore snuggled in around your neck like that. And then out of completely nowhere, push away and start playing with a doorknob and playing over here and reaching all the way
A little
back.
burst of energy.
Yes. And then for absolutely nowhere, just as soon as it came, she'd come back into just snuggling again. And so it's completely back and forth with her. Dash is pretty consistent, but
What are you doing?
So funny.
in captivity, the oldest sloth that we know of that was born and raised in captivity actually lived to be 54 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
And then his roommate, his name was Jan. I'm not sure why they named him Jan. I don't know if they thought that he was female when they first got him, but he was in a zoo in Germany, and his roommate Paula actually lived to be 52.
Oh wow.
So they're definitely doing something right now.
Yeah.
People are trying to mimic the type
Whatever
of
they're doing.
diets and everything that they've been feeding there.
I'm not in captivity. In the wild, what's
Now in captivity, it's not typical that they live to be 50. Around
Okay.
30 is what it
Okay.
typically is in captivity. And in the wild, we expect it to be about half of that, maybe around 15 years. But there's not been any scientists that have been able to track one singular sloth from birth until natural passing. A lot of times a sloth's life is taken prematurely by, another
Like an
animal
animal or
eating
something.
them. And so some people would consider that to be a natural passing for a sloth, but they need to be able to calculate it without having anything like that
Right,
in their life.
right.
really.
which is
So, yeah,
hard.
pretty difficult to do with a sloth that has essentially no defense mechanism, and
Right.
not, we've not been able to track any that haven't been able to, survive past something like that. I don't think we've talked about their claws yet. I'm very hungry, and you're looking for food. Their claws yet. Their claws work kind of opposite to our hands, where our hands, open-handed like this is a relaxed state, doesn't take any energy to do that. But squeezing down or holding onto a branch is difficult. We're using muscles. We get tired after we do that for a while. For a sloth, clamping down around a branch is actually their relaxed state. They don't use any energy or muscles to do that. But to open up those claws, that's what's more difficult for them to do. And so if a sloth were to actually pass away holding on to the branch of a tree, they would continue to hang there
Really?
until something rotted or knocked them off of that branch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Were you just faking me out? You're not actually hungry?
I'm gonna say sniff the bowl, but that, you wanted a Snickers bar.
He said, oh yeah, that.
Is it carrots, shaved carrots with it?
Shaved up sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes,
Yeah.
okay. I was like, the color looked different, but.
Some people, some organizations will give them carrots, but it's pretty high in fructose, and we give it more so as a treat than
Okay.
anything else. The same thing with fruits. They love fruits, and he'd probably eat a whole banana by himself, but it would really cause an overgrowth of yeast if they had too much of
Gotcha,
it, and so
okay.
we just try to give that in moderation. And Flash is an absolute sucker for bananas. In the mornings, if he's not coming down for me for his regular breakfast, I'll go in there with a banana and start to blow it up towards him, and he smells it pretty quickly.
And he's like,
Even
oh.
at the very top of his 20-foot enclosure, and you'll see, he'll be sitting in his hammock, and you'll see that little nose just start going, and then he'll look down at me.
He's like, oh, you got me
Yeah.
again. You're a fast eater.
You can see too while he's chewing that little how it sucks back into their head like that.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure what the science is behind that, but it's really freaky sometimes when you're watching it. And sometimes with Flash, if he's hanging up there on that branch and you look at his eyes just the right way, if you look from this way up at them, because they kind of bulge out a little bit, you can actually see right through his eyeball. And it's really
Really?
weird,
Oh,
but
wow.
yeah. You can kind of see on the sides of his head where that hair kind of parts.
Yeah, it's like a
That-
little-
Yeah, that right there on the side, up underneath that is actually where their ears are at. And if you remind me when I go
Okay.
transfer him over, I'll actually show it to you. If I go right now to try and show you, he's gonna think it's time to
It's time to
transfer
be done.
over. But yeah. And they're fully formed little ears like ours are.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just little-
They don't have as many folds and stuff in them, but
Okay.
they are little, they stick out similar to how ours do. A lot of people think that they'd be like chickens, like a little hole in the side of
Yeah.
their head or something, but they are fully formed. They're pretty cute to see. They're messy eaters sometimes. They'll push all the food over